Trump is talking to Rogan. Obama is stumping for Harris. And a VP candidate has a 7-letter word for Musk. That's topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
His running mate, Elon Musk. Elon's on that stage, jumping around, skipping like a dip on these things. You know it.
Well then, it is getting a bit personal as 2 weeks from this moment, the first polls close on election night. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington Tonight. I'm Blake Berman. Some of the biggest names in politics in the headlines today. Former President Barack Obama stumping not once but twice today for Vice President Harris.
Somebody who was raised in a middle-class family, who actually worked at McDonald's. He worked at McDonald's when it was closed. I had spent 8 years cleaning up the mess that the Republicans left.
Meantime, Donald Trump's campaign revealing that he will sit down for the Joe Rogan Experience, the most listened to podcast in the country, and that'll happen on Friday. And Trump wondering today why his opponent, with 2 weeks to go, is not on the campaign trail today at all.
She's sleeping right now. She couldn't go on the trail. You know, you think when you have 14 days left, you wouldn't be sleeping. She's not doing anything today.
All right, so here we are 2 weeks ago. We begin tonight with our Robert Sherman, who is live in Detroit, Michigan this evening. Robert?
Hey there, Blake, with Vice President Kamala Harris back in Washington doing some interviews today. She's turning to her top surrogates in order to carry the standard and bring her message to the voters. Chief among them, former President Barack Obama, who will be speaking here in Michigan in just a short while after trying to fire up the base in Wisconsin just a short while ago. Here's what he had to say.
To them, freedom is letting powerful people do whatever the heck they want with no consequences. We do not need a president who will make problems worse just to make his politics better.
And that's not the only star power that you're going to be seeing out here on the trail, as Eminem is actually going to be introducing Barack Obama tonight. And then Bruce Springsteen will be joining the vice president as well as former President Obama in Georgia on Thursday. Next week, that trio gets back together in Philadelphia. The Harris campaign is hoping all of this star power will bring out the vote across the battleground states, which are all anticipated to be tight. Blake?
Our Robert Sherman live for us tonight in the battleground state of Michigan. Robert, thank you. So you just saw the 44th president out on the campaign trail today. The 45th, Donald Trump meeting with Latino voters in South Florida.
That they have, it's an incredible community, and I liked them and they liked me, and now they're seeing numbers that are shocking.
And the 46th president, the current one, President Biden, traveled to New Hampshire this afternoon to speak about lowering prescription drug costs alongside Senator Bernie Sanders. But the Democratic nominee who wants to be the 47th, Vice President Harris, off the campaign trail tonight, instead taping an interview with NBC News and a town hall with Telemundo. Our Kelly Meyer joins me live. Kelly, hello, hello. Great to see you as always.
Good to see you too.
An interesting couple days here for VP Harris, not out on the trail stumping, doing several interviews.
Yeah.
And we haven't really seen her alongside President Biden at any point soon.
And that's something that we have been following at NewsNation for the last several days, kind of asking that question to the White House and the campaign, when President Biden may appear on the trail with her. And they've been saying it to me like this, that the official events and the campaign events are kind of one and the same because they are both touting the legacy of the Biden-Harris administration. But for Harris, it seems as though she's trying to distinguish herself as her own candidate and kind of walking this tightrope between taking credit for her work for the last 3.5 years, but also saying, here's what I can do as president, to also say, maybe, distance herself from voters, maybe trying to hold her accountable for the things that happened in the last 3.5 years. So when I asked the White House even today if President Biden will be out on the road solo campaigning for her, they said, quote, we're still working through that schedule.
All right. Kelly Meyer, live with us tonight. Kelly, thank you. Vice President Harris's campaign today announcing that she will be heading to Texas on Friday. There is a big Senate race there, as you might know. The visit will also be used as an opportunity for the vice president to talk about abortion, while the campaign is also trying to court Latino voters. Joining us now is Kevin Munoz. He is a senior spokesperson for the Harris campaign. Kevin, always great to see you. Nice to speak with you, sir. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill.
Thanks for having me, Blake.
You got it. So let's get into it. Your campaign is trying to court Latino voters. Here's some numbers on Hispanic voters recently. 2016, 2020 exit polls show that the Democratic presidential candidates at the time got basically about 2/3 support. The New York Times poll that came out earlier this month showed Kamala Harris only getting 56% Hispanic support. Why is that in the campaign's assessment?
Well, look, thank you for having me again. And look, the last two polls I've seen when it comes to Latino voters is that we're about at those 2020 levels. At the same time, I don't think this is a campaign that rides the roller coaster as much as it does the work that matters to reach these undecided voters in this final 2 weeks. Look, Latino voters are looking for somebody that is going to create good paying jobs, invest in their small businesses, create safer communities, address affordable housing. And that's exactly what we did today with launching a new policy plan that's really focused on answering a simple question. Who is fighting for you in those issues? We know that this is a policy agenda that is popular, and we just have to put in the work, and that's not what Trump is really doing.
So I'm looking at the poll from the New York Times, Hispanic voters. Whose policies helped or hurt you? President Biden's policies. Hispanic voters say only 22% say it helped them. Donald Trump's policies. Hispanic voters, 35% say it helped them. They're saying right now that the last presidential administration helped them more than the current administration. Is that one of the reasons why we're not seeing President Biden alongside Vice President Harris out on the trail right now?
Well, look, Blake, the person that I work with is seeing a tremendous growth and improvement among those key economic issues and who is fighting for them. Just today, and new polling showing that the vice president and her vision, lowering costs, creating opportunity, is resonating among Latino voters. At the same time, I think that our view is that we continue to have to be in those places where our voters are consuming their news.
How do you overcome it, though, Kevin?
Make sure that we have those interviews like we're doing tonight.
When you look at the economy, 20% of Hispanic voters say it's only excellent or good. 80% describe it as fair or poor. That's the number one issue. So I hear you, but I guess what I'm getting at is, can it cut through when this constituency is clearly saying that they are not benefiting from it?
I kind of disagree with that assessment. What I would also say, though, is I think that you know and I know that polling Latinos is not easy. And I don't think we're going to continue to just go after number by number instead of what we are hearing and seeing on the ground, which is that voters are looking for a candidate that represents change, that is going to fight on issues, not deliver on the same stasis that Donald Trump represents, and we're going to continue to put on the work. 14 days is a long time in a close election, and we're focused on doing that work.
All right, let me take you broader here for a second. Pennsylvania, the key battleground state, and the longtime Democratic Senator Bob Casey, he's on the ballot there, Kevin, as you know. He ran this ad the other day. I'll play a part of it for you. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Casey bucked Biden to protect fracking, and he sided with Trump to end NAFTA and put tariffs on China to stop them from cheating.
So in that ad, he's saying, I'm bucking Biden. Donald Trump was right on certain things. He describes himself as an independent. He doesn't mention Vice President Harris at all. Does that not hurt your candidate when that is the message in the key state of Pennsylvania from the top Democrat in Washington on the ballot there?
Well, Blake, I think we've long said that every candidate's going to run their own race. And I think that the vice president is running a race that matters to a lot of Pennsylvania voters. When you look at what she has accomplished to bring back manufacturing to the state, when she talks about the fact that she's lowering prescription drugs, and I think we got to run the race that we're running against. And here's the reality, Blake. Donald Trump shipped jobs abroad and lost jobs for the state. Donald Trump did nothing to address those real issues that matter to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we're going to continue to drive that contrast, especially when it comes to an issue that you just mentioned, abortion rights. And I think we have to continue to cement that contrast in the race that we are running.
Okay. Let me leave you with this, Kevin. We learned today that Donald Trump is going to be doing the Joe Rogan Experience, the #1 podcast in this country. Vice President Harris did call her daddy, as you know, a week or so ago. Is there a possibility that Vice President Harris does the Joe Rogan podcast, or is that door closed at this point in time?
I have no new interviews to say, but obviously she just taped 2 big interviews. I'm really excited about the one she did today on Telemundo, and I think we're going to have more interviews throughout this final stretch to make sure we meet those voters.
All right, Kevin Munoz, senior spokesperson for the Harris campaign. Kevin, always great to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight. Hope you come on back. Just 2 weeks to go before the big election.
Thank you, Blake.
Kevin, thank you. You got it. All right, joining me now here on the Hill, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff, Brad Howard, Democratic strategist. Hello to you both.
Hello,
nice
Blake.
to have you all in.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you've been all around the world. You've been doing TV here in Washington. I don't know which one's better.
Heading out on the trail next week.
Are you? Okay. What'd you hear there?
It's interesting when I think the Democratic hurdle with Hispanic and Latino voters are cultural issues and not economic ones. I think that's where the biggest divide is between the two parties, and it's interesting that they're so focused on the economic issues. I think she rolled out a great plan that's going to help with economic mobility. But the cultural issues are easy to relate to, easy to understand, and present a pretty stark difference between the candidates. Now, I think where the demographic where we're doing well, and I think we'll do well on election day, is Latina voters, and particularly in states like Nevada, who make up a large portion of independent voters in Nevada.
Just like sort of the gender divide, you see it within that group as well, men and women. Am I wrong to see that Casey ad and say, what's up? Like, if I close my eyes and just listen to that, I think I'm listening to a Republican. Am I not?
Well, no, it's a very different stance than a lot of Democrats were taking 4 years ago. And as the blue dog in the room, I'm welcoming this
Moderate
move.
Democrats.
Yes.
Right.
But what I'll say is, look, persuasion messaging is targeted to the individual, not the party. So he is targeting in his university, who he has ID'd as Bob Casey possible persuadables. The campaigns are united and together in GOTV. So they're going to turn out the base. And they're going to work together and coordinate on that effort. They're coordinating on the messaging on abortion and reproductive rights. So there's a lot of similarities, but he's targeting a very small universe of undecided voters that are undecided about him, and they may be decided about Kamala, they may be decided about Trump.
Trump on Rogan. What's that going to be like? Why is he doing it?
He's doing it because he's the king of earned media. I mean, he's just, look, what he did in McDonald's, he did the other day. I think I told you this. I can't remember if I told you this or not.
Yeah, you did half a dozen
countries, and in 5 different countries. That was the lead story. The lead overseas story was him at McDonald's. He's the master of this. But come back to a second about Pennsylvania, because what I see as a former candidate is, I love that ad as a Republican, because what that does is it gives Democrats Bob Casey's permission to split the ticket. You can vote for Trump and vote for me, and that's okay with me because I was against Biden on this. I'm with Trump on that, and it sort of lays that foundation. It's maybe one of the reasons you're seeing some of the polling. Again, polling is real difficult. I have to last with Kevin. Kevin's doing a great job. He's doing what he has to do.
Kevin, who we just spoke to from the Harris
Kevin Munoz. Every time a politician sees a poll they're losing in, they don't like the poll. Every time they see one they're winning in, they think the poll is fantastic, and that's what you have to do. Polling is really difficult right now in Pennsylvania because it's not falling into the traditional sort of boundaries. Trump is doing better with blacks. He's doing better with Latinos. Harris is doing better with white women than Democrats usually do. So it's all over the map. But come back to the original point about the Casey ad. When I see that ad, that's an invitation to split the ticket, and that's big for Donald Trump.
All right. Thank you both. Have you back here later in the show. Still to come here on the Hill. He tried to prosecute Donald Trump in Georgia. Now we are learning that Nathan Wade had some interactions with the White House while Fani Willis was investigating the former president. What is this about? The transcripts, the information in them on the other side of the break. Plus, Brian Entin continues his drive across America to speak with voters. Where in this country is Brian Entin tonight? We talked to Brian in a little bit. And what is more important to voters this election, immigration or abortion? Where the two candidates are going that you would not expect them to go to hammer these two messages. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Welcome to Washington. We're back in 4 minutes. Go back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So he wanted to prosecute Donald Trump. So why did he meet with White House lawyers? You might remember the name Nathan Wade. He was a special prosecutor in the Georgia state case against Trump, in which Trump is charged with racketeering for his attempts, allegedly, to overturn the 2020 election results in the Peach State. The case is now on hold as there are questions about Wade's relationship with the district attorney, Fani Willis. But tonight, new transcripts from an interview with Wade and the House Judiciary Committee raised questions about who Wade met with and what he did not say to lawmakers under oath. Our Joe Khalil has the story from Washington tonight. Joe, this came out late last night, I believe, with the transcripts, and there are some questions today about this one.
Yeah, we looked through them today, Blake. So Nathan Wade, under oath, acknowledged per these transcripts that he met with the White House counsel's office at least twice. He also acknowledged he met with members of the January 6th committee back in 2022. Pretty clear from his testimony, though, that he was reluctant to provide some details. In fact, by the committee's own count, he answered, quote, I don't recall, nearly 6 times throughout the process. Take a look. These are some of the questions he was asked that he says I didn't recall to. Do you remember who was at these White House counsel's meetings? Do you remember if they were in person or by telephone? Do you remember whether you're referring to just one meeting at the White House or were there multiple meetings? All of which he answered, I don't recall. Now, you may remember that Wade, as part of the Fulton County team in Georgia that was prosecuting former President Trump for allegedly trying to overturn the 2020 election, he ended up leaving the team after his romantic relationship with DA Fani Willis became public. Now, back in February, he answered some questions from a witness stand about whether he was paying for the couple's flights and trips. Remember, he was getting paid by the county. This is what he said.
Travel was split roughly evenly. So where you see I have booked the flight or I've paid for a flight with my credit card, what you don't see is that she covered her own flight, reimbursement to me.
Blake, obviously, we don't know what was going on during those meetings when he was with White House counsel. Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee tell us today they are continuing to investigate Trump's prosecution in Georgia. Blake.
All right. Joe Khalil, live for us tonight in Washington. Joe, thank you. Joining me now, once again, Mick Mulvaney, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor, former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party. Counsel, I guess you could say, here on the Hill on NewsNation. Yeah, put it on. So look, the top lines, the headlines of this, they stink, right? They smell, and you can have a lot of questions here.
Mick, stop looking at me like that.
Mick's already digging it up. You see what?
I see a lawyer who's first time in a major investigation under the Supreme Court rules and cases, Rogan. If he's going to interview government witnesses, former government witnesses, he's got to get permission or meet with the current government officials. In this case, this was a bunch of lawyers getting together, going through not just the investigation, but the witnesses who they could interview, what they could ask, what was privileged, what wasn't, and probably a bunch of documents. It looks like they met for about 4 hours.
You want him going to the White House, though, in the middle of this? Like when you know Donald Trump is probably going to be running for president at the time.
Whether I know that or not, the law requires me to get clearance to interview these witnesses, including what I can ask Donald Trump if he'll sit down, but certainly Mark Meadows and others. So I hate to say it like there's nothing to see here, but I'm sure politically there's a lot to see.
Yeah,
here.
politically definitely a lot to see.
Let me ask my friend one question.
So hold on, as former White House chief of staff, put that hat on now, and then
Scott and I were talking about this off air. So whether or not the chief of staff would even know about it, he should. Okay, and if he doesn't, and he's finding out about it today, then there's some tongue lashing going on in the White House, because something this politically sensitive, you can't just leave to the lawyers. Lawyers make lousy politicians, even White House lawyers.
Even if it was just the investigatory stage of a state investigation?
I saw something in the transcript I have to ask you about. Okay. How many times have you been in the White House?
Several.
Okay, but you probably know you would know how many times you've been for this investigation. I would not recall. I can't recall is not the right answer.
A high-powered attorney not knowing on dozens of occasions.
Seeing his face?
That to me is this isn't like, pull someone off the street and, hey, what happened back in 2020? Oh, I don't know. He's the main guy and entrusted in that position, and to give the answer, I can't recall. Why do you trust him to run that case?
Well, that may be true, but to not understand, or rather to not remember the details is one thing. We advise witnesses all the time. If you don't have a full answer, if you don't recall all the details, say you don't recall. Now here, he could have outlined broader parameters, if you will, but we talked about documents, just like I just told you. We talked about documents. We talked about privilege. We talked about research. We talked about who we wanted to talk to and what we wanted to talk to them about. That's time-consuming, but just generally, I remember that.
Scott and I are both aware of the concept of the appearance of impropriety. It's something that's beaten into every lawyer's head, and certainly that is here. Whether not anything right or wrong, I'm not going to jump to conclusions.
Why do you find conspirity behind everything? This was an innocent meeting.
And I'm saying that I don't ever assume a conspiracy in this town when incompetence can explain things, right? You just don't. but there's the appearance of impropriety here. And if there was nothing wrong, if you're doing what the law requires, why not come and say, this is what the law requires? I was there 2 times. I talked for 4 hours. He's got none of that.
All right.
Hard to disagree with you.
Mick, Scott, have you back later in the show. Thank you both. There is still much more to come. Here on the Hill, Brian Entin is back as he continues the Driving the Vote series. Brian is live somewhere across the country tonight. I hope you're not like literally driving right now. But where are you right now, Brian? Or are we getting that in a couple?
Listen, I'm going to give you a couple of hints, Blake. We pulled over, by the way. 7 U.S. presidents were born here, and Superman, the Man of Steel, was born here. We'll reveal it coming up after the break.
Driving the Vote series, other side of the break. Brian Entin live. You're watching
the planet Krypton
here on NewsNation. Stay with us.
He's in Illinois.
All right, welcome back to the Hill here on NewsNation. 2 weeks until Election Day with a race that could be considered a coin flip, at least at this point in time. The campaigns are on a final blitz in the battleground states, several events happening within the next hour. Top left, former President Trump will be rallying in Greensboro, North Carolina. Bottom left, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance in Tucson, Arizona. On the Democratic side, for Vice President Harris, top right, Detroit, where the rapper Eminem is set to introduce former President Obama. Bottom right, Tim Walz in Racine, Wisconsin. Vice President Harris, by the way, back here in Washington off the campaign trail this evening doing an interview tonight. All right, now there is a state that we used to always talk about in the home stretch, Ohio, and for good reason why. Would you look at this right here? This goes all the way back some 60 years, dating back to LBJ. Blue, red, blue, red, blue, red. You name it. It flowed nonstop from one party to the next. And we focused on Ohio for good reason, because every president during that time who ended up winning Ohio actually ended up winning the presidential race. That was until the last election when Donald Trump won Ohio and lost the election. All right, so let me take you here to the DDHQ forecast and why we're talking about Ohio here for a second. One of the reasons why. This is the forecast, right? You know the 7 key swing states at this point, the 2 out west, the 2 in the southeast, and then the blue wall. But look at what sits right in the middle of the blue wall, Ohio. And it is essentially sort of looked over at this point in time, at least among the swing states. Here's how everything worked out in 2020. This was the map then. Again, blue across the blue wall there in the Midwest. Ohio turned red. Now, let me take you to part of the story in Ohio. This was the 2020 presidential race. President Trump won it easily. He coasted. He won by 8 points in 2020. But let's compare that to what happened back in 2016. So in 2016, Trump won by 8, right? And 8 points or so. And look at what he did in 2020. Again, 8 points, right? So he's had a hold on Ohio over the last 2 cycles. But let me take you up here to the northeast part. There's a county up there, Trumbull County. And that sort of tells some of what's happening in Ohio. Trump won that state by 6.3, or won that county rather, by 6.3, just outside of Cleveland, Akron, in 2016. But in 2020, look at what happened. He won it comfortably by 10. His lead grew in the Republican county of Trumbull County. So you're probably wondering, why are you talking about Ohio? Why are you talking about Trumbull County? Here's why. All right, so that is where we find our Brian Entin this evening as part of our continuing political road trip, Driving the Vote. Brian has been going all over the country. Hello, Mr. Entin. He is live for us tonight in Ohio. You're in a town called Center of the World, Ohio, I'm told. Entin, you're the best, and you found another one today.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know, we were driving down I-80, and we saw it on the map, and we figured we might as well check this out. Look at this sign, Center of the World. What does it mean? Well, basically, back in the 1800s, there was a businessman who thought this would be the center of trade, and decided he was going to call it Center of the World. Didn't really happen. I think there was like one gas station in this town, but it is sort of in a way the epicenter of this big political shift that you were talking about, and something in American politics known as the big swap.
At Ohio's Canfield Fair, the yelling and targeted attacks
have nothing to do with politics. But just like the Plastic Pigs Carnival race,
on your marks, get set, and
there's not much doubt about the big winner here.
Donald Trump.
Definitely President Trump.
He won me over. He did the job.
At the county Republicans' tent, a steady flow of people picking up Trump signs and T-shirts.
I don't know which one to get.
Trump's America First policies have scored big here, fueling a populism that has upended politics.
The city workers, union workers, he looks out for us in a weird way, and he does care.
Conventional wisdom was that areas just like Northeast Ohio, its manufacturing base and blue-collar neighborhoods, were the bedrock of the Democratic Party, especially in tough economic times. While those living in swanky neighborhoods, usually college graduates with high-paying jobs, generally voted for Republican platforms like lower taxes and deregulating business. Today, that's all changed.
How much education that you have, formal education, shapes how you vote now more than ever before.
Political science professor Joshua Zinger calls it the diploma divide, a realignment based on how many years a person spends in college, exposed to more liberal views on issues like abortion, gender identity, and immigration.
Generally, we see people with higher levels of education have more liberal attitudes on these culture war issues.
Voters like Steve Sozio, a retired lawyer in Cleveland who volunteers his services at the southern border.
What these migrants are doing are actually fleeing the type of people that Trump accuses them of being. Two of the people I counseled were policemen. Policemen who fought against the cartels, but the cartels got control, and the first thing they do is target people like that.
And he adamantly supports continued aid to Ukraine.
Ukraine is a real battleground for democracy. And if Putin gets control of that, God knows what's next.
While there are more college grads in the U.S. than ever before, they often settle in urban areas to be near jobs. It means states with smaller cities and fewer college grads, like Iowa and Ohio, have turned more red, while states like North Carolina and Arizona, which are luring more college graduates into their workforce, are now in play. But it presents a problem for Democrats.
Adding more votes in places like Boston or the Bay Area doesn't get you any more votes in the Electoral College.
It also has serious implications for control of the Senate. In Ohio, Sherrod Brown is the last statewide elected Democrat. He's locked in a fierce battle to keep his job.
We give him high marks.
Scott and Ann O'Donnell are longtime friends and supporters.
And I'd see him at the grocery store on the weekends waving at him. But no, I admire him, and I think he does what he thinks is the best for the people in Ohio.
He has voted with Biden numerous times. I'm not voting for him.
Increasingly for Democrats in Ohio, politics may seem a lot like a carnival game, with odds stacked against winning the big prize. And it really is interesting, Blake, when you think about the fact that Ohio was so important and that it was a swing state up until 2020. Driving around today up and down the highway, you see almost all Trump signs. I've barely seen any Harris signs. Blake?
Brian Ensign, fantastic once again from center of the world, Ohio, for us tonight. Brian, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, sir. Don't miss Brian's next stop on his road trip, Driving the Vote. This series continues here on NewsNation throughout the week. Next couple weeks continues tomorrow here on the Hill, 6 o'clock Eastern. Where in the country is Brian Ensign? He'll be with us tomorrow night. By the way, the Ohio Senate race, which you just heard from there or heard about there, it's a dead heat, basically. But the Republican candidate, Bernie Moreno, is getting a boost from a new player in the political world. He is by far the biggest recipient of contributions from the cryptocurrency sector, having received over $40 million. Now, his opponent, as Brian laid out, is Sherrod Brown, the chair of the Senate Banking Committee, and a key skeptic, really a key foe of the crypto world. The industry has pumped massive amounts into congressional races this cycle, airing ads in support of pro-crypto candidates on both sides of the aisle. Mick Mulvaney, welcome back. This is fascinating because crypto has spent more money in this race than the oil companies, than big pharma, you name it. And you might be thinking, what is this crypto thing? You were busting my chops for a while, and here they are. They spent north of $100 million trying to get on both sides of the aisle.
And I will continue to bust your chops about it just for fun. But look, what fascinates me about it as someone who watches this town is I'm interested in things that break the mold. One of the things about the 2024 election is that Trump is doing better with groups that Republicans don't do better with, while he's doing worse with groups he's supposed to do well with. Crypto doesn't fit neatly into the old Republican Democrat sort of silos. It crosses the aisle.
It's kind of libertarian in a way, or
it is, but you could make your money in a bunch of different ways and have money in crypto. You could be a big left-wing progressive who's just made a bunch of money in crypto, and you would understand its importance as a new sort of whole store of wealth. It is a new industry. It's starting to mature a little bit, not much. I remember about 4 years ago when I was doing this, their effort in D.C. was effectively people sitting in their basement writing nasty letters to their lawmakers. Now they have professional operations.
So show the numbers. The campaign contributions were nothing, a handful of million here or there. This time around, 120 million. You got 90 million Americans, it's believed, that own some form of cryptocurrency, a $2 trillion asset class. And now I think Washington's going to wake up to, wait a minute, RFK Jr. was for this. Donald Trump came out for this. And even Kamala Harris in the last week was like, she finally said the word.
Who are the two biggest names against crypto in Washington, D.C.? Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown. And Gary Gensler, he's not elected. So let's look at the elected officials. And look, this is part of the process. I'm just fascinated because it's not traditional Republican Democrat. I'm interested when we start to realign the interests in the country. And watch crypto this election cycle, the next couple will be fascinating to see.
All right, Nick, thank you. Still to come here on the Hill. You are looking live right now at two dueling rallies tonight. Donald Trump in North Carolina and the former president, Barack Obama, in Detroit, Michigan. Both expected to start within the next hour. We will show you those when they happen. Plus, the vice president heading to Texas this week. What's she doing in deep red Texas? This comes after Donald Trump went to deep blue Colorado. What was he doing there? And now she's going to Texas. What's going on? Full panel here on the Hill after the break.
I really think that the biggest problem this country has is what they've allowed to happen to us on the border. They've allowed our country to be destroyed.
You heard Tim talk about how Donald Trump actually protected you. Roe versus Wade overturned. Trump abortion bans in 20 states. He's out there saying everybody wanted it this way. No, they did not.
All right, welcome back. That was Donald Trump, former President Obama, speaking today about two of the hot-button issues this election, abortion and immigration. But what's interesting is where the campaigns are making their appearances down the home stretch. Donald Trump went the other day to Colorado, blue state, to spotlight immigration, while Kamala Harris is preparing to go to Texas, deep red, on Friday to talk about abortion. Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, Scott Bolden, hello to you both back. Aaron Perini, Republican strategist. Brad Howard, Democratic strategist as well. Okay, Aaron, so what's going on here? Because you had Trump going to Colorado, you have Harris going into Texas, trying to highlight the issues that they really lead each other on, but also going into states in which those races are settled.
Well, but it's an earned media play on what they want the news to be talking about, their top issues, right? So they are going into Colorado. You see Donald Trump to talk about immigration, to talk about crime, things that he polls better on. You see Kamala Harris in Texas wanting to talk about abortion. You're also going to see Donald Trump go to New York City and go to Madison Square Garden. There are competitive House races that sit all around the city. That is, if not one of the most expensive media markets in the country. And he's going to own the airways for there in the critical stretch right before the election to persuadable voters. It's a pretty good strategy.
But you remember 2016, right? Why wasn't Hillary in Wisconsin? Why wasn't she in Michigan? And I wonder if either of these candidates lose, you could say, why wasn't Kamala Harris doing something today? Why is Donald Trump going to New York? So on down the line.
It's different with Hillary, though, because she's just straight up ignored Wisconsin. Like that wasn't a state at all. The two of them are out there. Kamala could be doing more. I mean, she's taking today off just to do 2 interviews. Unless she's prepping because she's really worried about Anderson Cooper tomorrow, I don't know why she's off the trail today.
What do you want her going to Texas?
No, I think it's smart because, look, in the closing days of a campaign, I think you ask any campaign operative, they'll tell you the most powerful thing you can control is the narrative. You want people talking about the issues that benefit you and hurt your opponent, and abortion is clearly that issue. So by her going to a red state like Texas, which, by the way, have a very competitive Senate race in Colin Allred, who crushed Ted Cruz in the debate. Ted Cruz, who failed to get...
Ted Cruz, who crushed Ted Cruz. Someone will sit here and defend Ted Cruz, and it will be me.
All the 5 major daily papers in Texas endorsed
Not surprising. And also, the more that people are now seeing Colin Allred's record and the fact that he's against LNG exports in this country, Texans will not support him. Ted Cruz will win.
But what I'll say is, by going to a state that they don't expect her to go to, by the way, it's also Beyonce's hometown. So maybe we might see a surprise appearance that we didn't get.
Come on, you're not going down that road again. Come on, fool me once.
She's in Texas because they've got one of the most restrictive anti-abortion laws in the country, and she's going to highlight that. So that's great earned media. I'm not sure why Donald Trump is going to Colorado to talk about immigration. He can do that from Florida, anywhere else in one of the swing states. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
So Aurora he went to Aurora because of the situation in some of the communities there. But two big comments here from Kamala Harris, Joe Biden within the last hour. Let's start with Vice President Harris. There's been an issue recently about transgender rights. That's been big in Texas. In the Senate race there, she was on NBC News, asked about this a little while ago. Listen.
I believe we should follow the law. I mean, I think you're probably pointing to the fact that Donald Trump's campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars.
They're trying to define you on this.
Yes,
I'm asking you to define yourself, though. Just broadly speaking, what is your value? Do you believe they should have that access?
I believe that people, as the law states, even on this issue about federal law, that is a decision that doctors will make in terms of what is medically necessary.
You worry about the answer for Democrats. You've been worried for a week now. Is that the answer?
What in the word salad was that?
That wasn't word salad. It was the truth. Let me tell you something.
Oh, my gosh.
This was the law under Donald Trump.
I'm going to get to Mulvaney in a second.
Hold on 1 second. This was the law under Donald Trump. This occurred under Donald Trump, and they're trying to define her as if this is some new federal law. It happened under Trump. It was the law, and it's the law. And that answer isn't word salad. That answer is truthful.
Democrats are worried. You tell me. You've told us.
Yeah, I mean,
is that the answer?
Right. Democrats are worried because this is an easy to understand issue. It's a cultural issue that benefits Trump and generally hurts Kamala Harris. And what it is, and it really is not necessarily, I mean, this is it's a minor thing, but what's more powerful is when you talk about youth sports, because it's really affecting the future of people's children, and that they gravitate to. What she needs to do is answer with values and pivot. Like, if you're arguing process here and going to what's law, what's not, it's not a great answer.
Yeah. But this is not hard. I totally agree with you. It is not hard. And the basic questions you have to answer about wanting the job of being president, why do you want to be president? I don't think Kamala could even answer the basic tenet of that.
We opened the show by talking about why Trump is doing better with Hispanic voters than traditional Republicans. Please talk about this more. Please, Democrats, please talk about transgender issues, because in the list of the top 10 issues that drive voters, this is like number 72. And the more you talk about it, the more you drive voters to us, and we love it.
And in the black community, because demasculinization is a concern among Latino voters and black voters, and it's a real issue.
All right, I cannot believe, by the way, that NBC asked this question. Somebody got a tongue lashing after that interview was over, because they should never. Kamala Harris did not want to have that question asked in that interview.
So this just happened. Y'all told me about it walking into the studio. President Biden, he was out today in New Hampshire. This happened in New Hampshire?
That's my understanding.
So he's in New Hampshire today. He was there with Bernie Sanders talking about lowering prescription drug costs and said this. Watch.
We got to lock him out. Politically lock him out. Lock him out. That's what we have to do.
Politically lock him out.
Little asterisks there, a little creative writing at the end.
I'm old enough to remember when your candidate said the same thing about Hillary, and Trump did nothing to Hillary when he took the presidency.
He tried.
Democrats
he tried.
Do you want to play the clip where Barack Obama made fun of Trump's size? I mean, this is this world. We're doing this, right? Every time
he was mimicking the crowd size.
We do the same thing.
Again, this comes back to my point about narrative, right? This is not what we should be. We have to talk about this now, and it's not helpful. Like, focus on your vision for America's future. Talk about why Donald Trump is dangerous, and move on and show contrast. And she's doing. The campaign operations is doing a great job. They've made this race dead even. He's a well-known quantity. She is not, and yet the race is dead even. That is a huge feat. Now in the closing days of the election, she's got to control the narrative. She's got to get her message out, and we got to focus on ground. And that's what they're doing in Georgia. It's what they're doing in Pennsylvania and across the country.
Is that why Joe Biden's not out on the trail standing next to her?
Well, he's been on the trail.
Yes. Is that why he's not out on the trail standing
This is called honesty in your answer.
No, what am I? I'm logging integrity here, but listen.
No, I'm not saying you are.
The lockup piece. Let's remember, he's got 34 convictions. He's facing sentencing whether he wins or loses.
Where was
That's
Biden?
reality.
Pennsylvania?
New Hampshire.
No, New Hampshire with Bernie.
Okay.
New Hampshire.
Why? I mean, who cares?
Because that's my point. It's like, why is he even doing events?
Yeah.
I had a question today.
That's an easy trip from the beach, guys.
Yeah,
Right up there.
I asked, hold on. So to answer your question, I asked a respected pollster today, am I missing something in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
And because remember, the DNC avoided it during the primary.
It's light blue on your map.
The
got my attention.
The last poll in New Hampshire showed +2 to Harris. And so I was wondering, is something going on in New Hampshire? I asked a pollster and it was told, no, nothing that we know. So I thought that very same question.
I can see him going to Pennsylvania because he's still got a brand in Pennsylvania.
Joe Biden tanked to the New Hampshire primary, too, because South Carolina was his comeback.
I'll give you the last word here.
Honestly, at this point, Republicans are playing a game to a lower propensity voter because that is how the party realignment works. We took in more low propensity. So we have a bigger swath of voters to play. But it's big risk, big reward. Big risk, we're trying to get people who don't normally show up to take a pattern of behavior they don't normally do. Big reward, there's a lot more of them.
And we're doing high propensity voters that are still persuadable, like the Liz Cheneys of the world and the Mitt Romneys.
Low propensity voters. Why are they low propensity voters? Let's say it together. Because they don't vote.
Yes.
One of the things we'll see down the home stretch here. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Fun times coming up here. Another live look, Greensboro, North Carolina, where Donald Trump expected to speak any moment now. Another live look, Barack Obama out on the campaign trail for Vice President Harris. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, other side of the break.
NewsNation Thursday. J.D. Vance, Chris Cuomo, one-on-one in the final days of this election nail-biter. Watch the special NewsNation Town Hall. Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, only on NewsNation and streaming on X.
Go back here to the Hill on NewsNation. 2 live events, Donald Trump, Barack Obama here in the upcoming hour. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins me now. Leland, we watch, obviously, the top of the ticket. Obama's out on the trail tonight for Harris, but you got a big interview coming up. Mike Rogers, key seat in the state of Michigan that's being watched.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things right now that's happening in Senate races in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, they are moving Republican, unquestionably, but the Democrats, in some cases the 2 Democratic incumbents, are moving away from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. One of the more interesting things, and it shows you sort of how the sands or the